I'm Richard Harris, and welcome to Real Risk, the podcast that talks to people who put themselves in harm's way. You know the type. Big wave surfers, professional soldiers, base jumpers. I'll get inside the heads of men and women who seem fearless or even reckless. They might seem crazy to us, but most are far from it. We'll be talking about putting your life on the line for something important. We're talking about real risk. G'day, welcome to episode 11 of the Real Risk podcast. I hope you enjoyed the change of pace last week with the wonderful Peter Hellier. You would not meet a nicer and more generous guy, and I'm more than a little bit proud to call him my friend. Pete's a massive celebrity, so for him to give up an hour of his time within his crazy schedule is very cool indeed. And that's the thing I've found with some of these celebrities. I've been privileged to meet quite a few over the last couple of years, and whilst you would imagine there are plenty of reasons they might have tickets on themselves, it's hard for me to think of one who's been anything but humble and generous, especially to beginners like myself who are working on a little project like this podcast. Now, speaking of celebrities, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I am a little bit excited. Next week, I have one of the biggest names in show business and exploration in the world joining me for the show. It is a huge buzz to announce that I'll be interviewing James Cameron for episode 12. Of course, everyone knows Jim for his classic films, The Terminator, Aliens, The Abyss, Titanic, and Avatar, just to name a few. But did you know how passionate he is about deep ocean exploration? He started scuba diving at a very young age, and it's this obsession with the ocean that will be the focus of our chat, so do not miss that episode. Now, that bit of gossip should in no way diminish the amazing achievements of today's guest. Ashley Sanford is not only a champion top fuel drag racer, she's actually one of the friendliest, chatty young women I've ever met. But don't let her girl next door charm fool you. Ashley is a hardcore racing driver who sits in front of an 11,000 horsepower engine, which throws her down the track at speeds of over 330 miles per hour. You can convert that to kilometres, it's fast. The technology behind these machines is extraordinary. But what I hadn't appreciated was the skill and lightning reflexes of the drivers, which keep what can only be described as a bomb on wheels in a straight line down the track. Her enthusiasm and zest for life is so infectious, so it's a genuine pleasure to chat with this self-confessed adrenaline junkie. G'day, Ashley Sanford. Thank you very much for joining me.
Hello, I am so happy to be here, even though I'm very far away from you.
Now, where are you living at the moment, Ashley?
I live in Southern California, Fullerton, California to be exact. I've pretty much been born and raised here since I was 5 years old. Grew up a town over, so very much a California girl. And I do miss Australia, though. It's funny because getting to go there are so many similarities I see. It's really just the accent that are so different. So getting to go there so often for drag racing has always been like a home away from home for me. So I love it.
How many times have you visited to do the drags here?
Gosh, I've lost count now.
Oh, really?
But yeah, no, this would have been my fourth season. Unfortunately, COVID had some other plans of delaying things, which is, everyone's in their own boat with things going on with that. And unfortunately, drag racing was one of those things that has been put on hold. So yeah, I did 3 seasons out there and had an incredible time. Finished in a pretty good standings, and I was hoping this year was going to be that year we were going to clinch that number 1 spot. But you know what? 2021, we'll go after it then.
Absolutely. Now, let's go back to the start for you. When did you first have the idea that motor racing of some kind would be the thing for Ashley?
So, I like to say I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie. I grew up with my dad, who is very much like myself, always just wanting to go fast. Whether it was off-roading, where my family has 50 acres out in the Ocotillo Wells Desert here in Southern California, where we were on quads, buggies, now we have the Polaris Razors. I learned stick shift when I was like 9 years old. I was always thrown in a vehicle and wanted to figure it out and figure out how to, push the limits with it. And that's really where I'd start, I'd say. And so I was about 8 years old when my dad got started in sand drag racing. And for those who don't know, it is a form of drag racing that is just on 300 feet of dirt. So I definitely believe it was a little more dangerous than asphalt racing, just because dirt is a little more, let's say, unreliable. Things, little ruts can throw you off very quickly in just those 300 feet. So watched my dad do that and competed on a quad ATV from 8 years old to about 14, just for fun, but I just absolutely loved it. And when I was 14 years old, I did get inside of my grandpa's Super Comp dragster, which was my first dragster experience. Fast forward 2 years later, I had the opportunity to get in a blown alcohol stand dragster, which was going about 155 miles an hour when I just got my street driver's license. So I was definitely an odd 16-year-old in Southern California, but any chance I could get to go faster, that was what I was after. And so drag racing really just was that outlet for me, because there truly is no other faster motorsport in the world. So I just was completely in love with it. Always in love with the NHRA drag races, which are here in the United States, and they come to a local track, Pomona, California, where 2 times a year they'd come and compete, and my family and I always went out there and watched. But it was just, going from small leagues to big leagues, and I never really thought I could pull it off. I was just, we're a family race team that does something super recreational on the weekends. How could we afford, a big time sponsor to come out and ever do that? But it was just always something in the back of my mind. And so as I was graduating high school out here, I was like, okay, what's Ashley going to do when she grows up? I really couldn't, figure out which route I would like to take in college. And so I kept going back to drag racing, and I sat down with my dad and was like, okay, you're going to call me crazy. I just hold on to your seat, but I want to go drag racing. Like, that's what I want to do. I want to figure out how I can figure it out and really go for it. And to my surprise, he was totally excited about it and was like, okay, well, let me help. Let's see what we could do together. Like, it was a dream of his in a way too, to, make that big leap forward into the big leagues. And so from there, that's like, I could keep going on and on. But yeah, no, from there, we decided Ashley was going to really go for it.
Well, that kind of kills one of my questions that, what do your parents think about this, and do they worry? It sounds like they very much encouraged you into the sport.
Yeah, so my dad, he's always been the one ever since I was, even back when I was 8 years old. He was the one who always trusted, my instincts. He, I guess, saw himself in me, and he's very much like me when it comes to driving these vehicles. And there's a lot of fear that, can be behind it, but, you have to have a good mindset and control about these cars, and he always saw that in me, so he was never too concerned. Mom, on the other hand, God bless Mom, she has been put through some stress because I'm still her little girl, so it definitely was a lot harder for her. Kind of fast forwarding to when I got my top fuel license, she had to stand by the paramedics because she swore she was going to pass out. So she's one of those who, she believes in me, she trusts me, but it still scares her to death.
Well, having done a bit of research now about this sport, I can see why she might be a little bit anxious. And while we're talking about family and the effect of this on, your loved ones, you've also got a partner.
My boyfriend and I just celebrated 10 years together. So
well done.
We made it to a decade.
Well, that's pretty good, because I had my 30th wedding anniversary 2 days ago. So
congratulations to you. I love that.
It's nice when you find a soulmate. But anyway, now
Absolutely.
I can tell you my wife worries a lot about what I do with my cave diving and exploration and expeditions. And how does your partner feel about it all?
When we first met, we were in high school, and he had no idea what I even did. Like, he didn't even understand how crazy it was. I took him out to his first race, and he was like, are you sure you should be doing this kind of thing? And I quickly, convinced him. We showed him the ropes of how it all works, and again, like my mom, he does get worried. He trusts me so much, and he knows that, things can happen, but at the same time, I'm doing what I love, and he supports me for that. And so to me, that like means more than enough. And yeah, no, he he gets worried, but I would say he's like the perfect balance between my mom and my dad when it comes to that.
Do you ever feel guilty or selfish for putting your loved ones through that sort of worry?
I'm gonna sound so bad, but I don't, because I truly, like, the way I look at life, at least, is anything can happen. I mean, I could walk outside and a car could run me over. I mean, there's like, you could play that game forever, and the way I look at it, when I'm in those cars, I would never get in a car that isn't safe. I wouldn't put myself in a situation in a car that wasn't safe. Things could happen, but we've come so far in the technology in these cars that if like a really bad wreck happened, I should be as protected as possible, as, much as the risks are there. I have to just believe in my team, and I have to believe in the safety equipment, that will all do its job. And yeah, at the end of the day, knowing that I have the people closest to me support, I think that helps with, not having guilt there, because I know no matter what, they believe in me, and I think that's like what's most important.
Well, we'll come back to some of the risks and maybe some of the excitement of the sport a little bit later, but I think we've probably got a bit ahead of ourselves because, like me, many people listening to this might not really know anything about drag racing. Can you give us a quick 2-minute summary of the whole thing?
So, drag racing. I mean, what you think of, some people like go to Fast and Furious. Get that out of your mind. That's not it. Drag racing actually really originated here in Southern California. Wally Parks is the founder of NHRA, who really put together this organization that does drag racing in a safe, in confined area. And today, what some of the fastest cars on earth, the top fuel dragsters, which I've been so lucky to have been able to compete in, are long wheelbase cars. The motor is right behind me, where you'll see sometimes the funny cars, the motor is right in front of them. These cars are going down, we're going down 1,000-foot tracks in just, I mean, this is crazy. We're going down 1,000-foot tracks in under 4 seconds. I mean, a good time is in the 3.7 seconds ETs, lapse times. And we're hitting over 300 miles an hour pretty much every lap. So it's just, I know, just try and grasp it for a second, but it is the fastest thing on the planet, the highest accelerating, and actually the highest deaccelerating thing, because the second we hit that 1,000-foot marks, we have a short distance to slow these puppies down. So parachutes are out, our carbon fiber brakes are being pulled. The G forces that you hit are, about the same as astronauts, but you actually hit more when you hit the parachutes and slow down. It is the wildest ride. If you ever have a chance to go out to a drag race, I encourage it. It actually sets off on the Richter scale, which sets off a baby earthquake when 2 cars go. So you will feel it in your bones, quite literally.
That's the thing I've heard from people who have been to these drags, that standing on the side of the track is not just the visual stuff, but the sensation of these cars going down the track is absolutely, literally rocks your world. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, it hits all 5 senses. You get everything. It's overwhelming in the best way.
Well, I'm going to tell you about my motorsport endeavours, because I've recently bought a 1968 Mini Cooper S replica.
Ooh.
And I think it's going to pretty much achieve 100 horsepower. Now, I gather that your car would be 2 orders of magnitude greater than that, somewhere around 10,000 horsepower. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, they're estimated about 11,000 horsepower right now. So it is a little bit more.
And I'm putting petrol in mine, but what do you fuel your dragster with?
Yeah, so top fuel dragsters run on nitromethane and petrol. So that nitro is what, if you get to go to drag race, you are going to literally smell to the point of sometimes tears coming out of your eyes. It is so strong. And yeah, no, that's definitely helps power these guys to get to where they need to.
I think that's the same stuff I used to put in my model aeroplanes. Is that right?
I actually wouldn't know that. I have
Oh,
never done model airplanes,
see, I've
but
done my
that would be pretty
research.
cool. You know more than I do about nitro.
A lot of people would be familiar with that smell. And a couple of other fast facts that I've 5 Gs of acceleration
Yep.
and up to 120 miles per hour in the first second from when you
Yeah.
leave the line.
Yeah, no, and it's pretty crazy because a lot of people do ask, they're like, well, what's it like at this hit? And I mean, the hit is incredible. You know, you're exactly getting to the 60-foot mark and literally like 60 miles an hour. It really puts you in the back of your seat. But what a lot of people don't realize is about half track, about 600 feet is when the clutch is engaged. It's a transifical clutch, which it is literally just coming together. And once it is locked about that time, that's when it just that's where it really kicks you in the butt, and you see that major speed difference going from, you know, that 250 to 280 to 330, and that's in just the last stretch of it. So to me, that's the most exciting part.
Why have they made it just a quarter mile? Why, these things sound like they could just keep going faster and faster. Would it be better to be a mile or a half mile?
So actually, quarter mile is what a lot of drag strips have, and a lot of different classes run. But the top fuel and funny car classes, they only run to 1,000 feet because of the danger issue. Which, I mean, gosh, I wish I could take my top fuel car anywhere. I would get everywhere so quick. But yeah, no, at that point, I mean, they really are ticking time bombs from the second you start them up. Once you make it past 1,000 foot, they were learning at getting to a quarter mile, it was just more room for error, for things to go wrong. And just thinking of, you know, the crew, the track cleanup, everyone. Yeah, it's exciting to see a big blow up. It will happen still, but it's expensive. It makes a mess. So they're really trying to find a way to still hit those speeds, but make it safer for the drivers, crew, everyone. And that is why it has been shortened down to 1,000 foot. But I mean, gosh, to only imagine how far they could really go.
The technology of these cars is one of the things that really interested me, and I'm going to put a link in the show notes to a YouTube segment called "How a Dragster Works" by Popular Mechanics, and it's extraordinary, from the the fuel that we've talked about to the special tires and the way they perform from the start, and the clutch is an amazing thing, and the motors themselves. They showed in this video how often, or pretty much after every race, you have to rebuild the engine and replace some of the components that have fried themselves or exploded or welded together, or it's just
Exactly.
right on the edge, isn't it, of what these things can cope with.
Totally. And I mean, that's where it's like some people, you're like, what? It's just 3 seconds. But the excitement is also behind the scenes. And what is really cool about, I mean, pretty much every single drag race is an open pit pass, which means every spectator has the ability to walk up and watch the cars get torn down and rebuild. And as long as there's not a big time crunch, you're more than welcome to talk to everyone, ask those questions. It's like, I mean, it's educational and exciting. And yeah, no, you get to be a part of it. You feel like you are really like in the I mean, you're in it, because there are times where you'll hear someone yelling at you and they're walking by with a hot clutch plate and you better get out of the way. It's a very exciting experience.
Yeah, that's very generous on the part of the teams and the race and the drivers to allow the public
Yeah.
in like that. No wonder it's such a popular sport for the public.
Absolutely. Yep. And then it's great too because, you know, you could bring your whole family, everyone of all ages. It's something exciting. And I mean, again, you could learn so much.
So put yourself in the car while you're on the start line, and or actually, you better go back a step and tell us about the little burnout that you do first and what that's all about.
Yeah, so I know I could even go back just one step further. So, getting into the car, I am equipped in a fire suit. I get in the car, and you know, helmet, gloves. Pretty much the only thing visible are my eyes right here because I have a socket that just lets those guys do their job. So, still need to have those to be able to make that happen. And so, get in the car, and I have someone else has to strap me in because If I were to do it myself, I would not do it nearly as tight as it needs to be. They strap me in to the point where sometimes I feel like I can't even breathe, because on that first hit, it's going to loosen it by an inch, those seat belts. And so you need those to protect you. And so we pull up to what we call is the water box, which is going to be right in front of the car, in front of the two lanes that you're going to go in front of. Start the cars up. I do not start the car myself. I do, I turn on the ignition and I, make sure clutch is in, brakes on, that kind of thing. But behind me, they have a starter motor that does all that. And so a car gets started up, and first things first is warming up those back tires. And so we have a little water box in front of us that we'll go in, dip in, and just about not too far after that, right at the starting line, actually right where we want to take off, is where we try and line down, doing that burnout so we could lay down some nice warm rubber, sticky rubber, so during takeoff you have that help hold you down, because a lot of the times, kind of going ahead of myself, cars can lose traction, smoke the tires shake, and then you lose the run. So you do everything you can to get that traction. Burnouts are so fun. Doing the burnout, we like to do a nice long one. Sometimes the cars want to skate a little bit, so you're doing a little dance, getting down, and it's a good crowd pleaser as well. And so from there, what we do is they do have reverse. I will put the car in reverse, slowly get myself back, and then this is where it starts, for me at least, getting really, serious and exciting. And you're, really just kind of getting into that like computer mode, sometimes I like to say, because when you're in the car, you don't necessarily want to you don't want to think, you want to react. And so you just have to go off of what you know, and that's where it kind of that all engages. So get back into forward. There thankfully it's never happened to me, but there's sometimes people who've gotten a little too excited and they're all set up and they're still in reverse. That's not good. So make sure you're in forward, pull yourself up to what now is called the Christmas tree. No, it is not a green pine tree. It is a tree of light bulbs, which at the very top you will have ambers, one row of ambers, well, two rows of ambers, and then yellow, 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 green, and the dreaded red. And so you're going to pull up closer to that where there are sensors where you're going to try and bring the car up to get that first row of ambers. And that's just, in telling your buddy, or I say your buddy because until the lights come down, I usually like the guy in the other lane. You're going to each get up to the first ambers, and it's saying, okay, I'm ready, you're ready, let's go. So at that point, I am just using between the clutch and brake, letting off gently on both, just idling up. The fuel is not fully on. If the fuel was completely on, if your nitro was completely going through, we'd have everyone smoked out of there. So it's at a small percentage up until that point. And so once both cars are ready, that's when the fireworks start going off. You put fuel all the way on. You'll hear a significant difference. I love that sound. And that's where you're going to we let off the clutch. And at this point, all that is holding back the cars is the brakes. And there have been times where brakes have gotten a little worn sometimes. And the brakes definitely want to slip away from you, and now you're just like holding on with all your might, just your one side with the brakes, because these cars want to take off. And so at that point, you were just literally bumping in to get that last set of ambers, and once both drivers have that, there is someone on the starting line with a little button that they will let off, and once that happens, it activates the tree, which you will see the yellow, 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 green. And for us, our cars actually have a bit of a slow reaction time from the time we hit the throttle. So the second you see yellow, you smash the throttle as hard as you can, like you are mad at the world. Like you are the most mad in the world. You want to stomp down so hard on it. And that is when it kicks in. That's when you hold on for dear life. You follow the groove, which we like to call, which is really just the rubber that is already formed in front of you because you want to stick on that rubber. Sometimes it moves to the right, sometimes it moves to the left. So you got to pay attention a couple hundred feet ahead of you. And at that point, like I was saying originally, it's all reacting. And you can't think too ahead of the car. You just have to feel what the car is doing. There are sometimes things that go wrong behind you. I have had a couple of one very bad blow up behind me. And that's where you just, during those moments, you can't be thinking about that. You just have to be reacting to what the car does. Say we're on an awesome run. You just get down there. You pay attention to where you are on the track, which has taken time. My first few laps, I was going a little too far. I was getting a little off because your brain really does have to learn to adapt to such a fast speed. And so once you've, gotten that down, you'll be able to find out where you are at the end of the track. Shoots go. Start shutting everything off. And at this point, I'm usually screaming as long as it's a great run and just a pure excitement. And I'm telling you, there are times on those runs where I get out of the car and I could have just ran like a marathon. My heart is thumping out of my chest and my adrenaline is through the roof. And from starting the car up to getting down the track, it happens in a minute sometimes.
That is extraordinary. And I've got about 1,000 questions about that 3.5 seconds.
A lot. And it's crazy because, yes, it's 3.5 seconds, but so much goes into those 3.5 seconds. And it definitely, in my heart, it feels like that's what makes it so exciting. It's that build up.
I think of all the adventurers or risk takers or whatever category we put you into, Ashley, you are the first person who has really invoked the big surge of adrenaline that you get from your sport. Even the Sean, the base jumper I spoke to, he's very measured and and I'm sure you are too, in terms of what's going on in your brain. But
yes,
he would say that, if he does a good jump, I don't think his heart rate, really goes up that much. But what you've just described is so out of control in some ways and yet so controlled at the same time. It's amazing.
I like to say it takes a certain kind of crazy to do what we do because there are a lot of similar people to myself who, for me and my brain, it all makes sense. And I can't even communicate what goes in there. But when I'm talking about it, I just feel like I'm just all over the place, just excited. My adrenaline feels like it's starting to pump just thinking about it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad I don't have a heart condition. Anyway, so at the start there, when your clutch is off, but your brake is on, why doesn't the car just destroy itself at that point?
You would think so, right? Well, the cars are designed for that. And also we're talking in just, a few seconds. And so there are times when, say, a competitor is maybe trying to be, how do I put this in a nice way? A little bit of a jerk. They can hang you up on the light, and that will actually harm the motor. Not necessarily right there on the line, but, as you're going down track. So, a respectful thing to, each competitor is you do want to try and make it a quick, procedure getting through and waiting on that last one, because being hung out on the light, what we like to call it, is not a good thing.
No. And is it a handbrake you're describing or a foot brake?
It is a handbrake, yes.
Okay.
So left pedal, my left foot is clutch, and right is just the throttle, and handbrake is here. And for those who want to know, parachute is on the steering wheel.
Is that a button?
It is a button.
Can that be accidentally bumped during the race?
It can be, and it's happened, not to me, but it's happened to competitors before, or just an airline braking, something silly, which things just happen, and it's just so devastating when that does, because it just gets you out before you even started.
And is that compressed air that ejects the parachutes?
Exactly.
Right, very cool. Yeah. How do you know Is it obvious when you see the finish line go past, and that's the very second you have to hit or change
Yes.
tact?
So what we do is we have cones that are in the middle of the track. Those are sensors. So those are, taking your times down. So you have those to pay attention to, as well as usually on the guardrails, which are on your side. There's usually markers on there, if not usually the scoreboard, which, is up for the fans and the crew able to see. That's usually right about where this finish line is as well. So you have a few usual, different things you can look at. I've honestly, as a driver, just trying to figure out what best works for me, have, moved around all three. For me, the guardrail is my best one, just because it's usually the one that's always there, right at the right spot. So that's the one I go off of.
You're listening to Real Risk, the adventure podcast with Richard Harris. Actually, I'm quite interested in some of the medical stuff around the acceleration and deceleration. I've read a little bit about, because if you accelerate at 5 Gs, don't you just about black out? And how do you keep an eye on the track?
Yeah, no, it's actually, been a thing. It's pilots. Oh goodness, what's the name?
Neil Armstrong?
No, but there is a name for it when you can black out. And it actually, backstory, something similar has happened to me. One of the times at a race here in the States, my helmet visor broke. And so usually before the race, you have time where you're in the car and it's very warm. You're in a cockpit that's very small. If you're claustrophobic, do not recommend being a dragster driver or any drag racer for that matter, because you're usually in a confined space where, the airflow is a little restricted. And so I was just like, okay, it's fine. I'm just going to try meditative breathing and, try and hold as much oxygen as I can. Well, not the best idea because, it was a hot Southern California day that I was racing. And with even just that visor locked in the helmet at the time I had didn't have the best breathing filter down here in the chin area. Once I, it's probably 10 minutes of just having that on, waiting to go. Because sometimes, there's cars delayed, but they want you in your vehicle at least 5 minutes before you're up. So you expect to spend that much time completely suited up in your car. And so at the hit of the throttle, I passed out for a second. And the craziest thing is I immediately woke back up and I went back on the throttle to try and win the race. So maybe not the smartest move, but it was an actual competition race. And, sometimes when eliminations matter, you do what you got to do. And but so for me, though, that was just another time many years ago, but it is an issue. And for me, I've just learned to best adapt your body to it. And what they recommend is when you are getting licensed these cars to you do it in increments. You first do a burnout, then you go to a couple hundred feet, then you go to half track and see where you're at then, feel your body, how's it doing. And for me, I did a couple half track pulls before I even attempted doing the full track, just because I was like, wow, okay, my body needs another one of those. And because your vision is absolutely, it's foggy, it's tunnel visioned. And so it's important to, have that, but also our bodies are so incredible. My very first full track pull, I wasn't amazed that I was actually able to see, the billboard and everything. And your body will adapt quicker than you think to it. At least it did for me. And as much as it's, it could be an issue, and the incident I brought up, just the airflow is very important to have that, the oxygen going to your brain. As long as you have that, you'll be good to go.
And what about the other end of the track, the deceleration? Because I've heard you can detach your retina and injuries like that in your eyes. Have you heard or seen that?
Gosh, I have heard, but, I think things are better now as far as, the track's important, having a smooth shutdown. I've actually been on a couple tracks that are on the bumpier side, and, you're trying to slow down a car when it's very bumpy. I could imagine something like that could happen to you. But also, as quick as you want to be on it, you do not want to be harsh about it. So for me, at least, is I hit the parachutes and I gently get on the brakes. I don't, slam on the brakes because, the parachutes will do a lot as long as they come out. There are times where the parachutes won't come out, and yep, you're going to just have to deal with it and slam on those brakes because those are your best bet.
And is there plenty of runoff to stop if you don't have a parachute?
Tracks are different. So there is one track, actually the one local to me in Pomona, California, that has one of the shorter shutdowns. And you just, have to make sure you're on it, on your procedure as far as getting on that parachute as quickly as possible. And as long as you do, you'll be good. And then there are some tracks that are like a mile long of a shutdown that goes uphill. So there's like really, nothing to worry about. But past the pavement part, there's always a sandbox, which plenty of people have been in, not myself. I hope I don't one day, but if I do, it happens. So the sandbox is, everyone says you don't want to go to the beach at the drag races. And it will slow the car down. It has safety nets at the end to, capture the car if it does go at a high speed through it. And so there are those safety measures there. And crashes happen often, I'd say. I mean, it happens with these cars, and they, for the most part, always do their job. It has been quite some time since there's been a devastating accident in the drag racing world. So, and even then, we're always evolving and learning. And I've had a couple close calls where my parachute didn't come out on time. And not gonna lie, it's gotten my heart racing even more than it was just thinking of going there. And but the good news is that's why the sand trap is there, just in case.
Now, your crew aren't listening at the moment, so we can be perfectly honest about this. Tell me, how much of being successful in the car is down to the car itself and the preparation and the technology, and how much is the skill of the driver? Because, I'm almost thinking, having watched this Popular Mechanics video, that it's all about the car. I mean, it's just so much technology involved, and as long as you can keep it in a straight line, it seems that's very important. What's your feeling as a driver? Is it all about you?
You said it perfectly, because I've been asked this question actually a handful of times, and I feel like I've always had a hard time like doing, say a certain percentage, because it really is so important for both components to be, working perfectly between the driver and the crew. Because if something is not put together correctly, or it's a bad part, it's completely out of my control. I'm just along for the ride. So on runs like that, I mean, it is like, I'd say 80-20, but then there's some runs where, say, the track isn't in the best condition and everything's set up perfectly back there. There's a lot more weight on me now. So that run, it would be me 80 in the car 20, So it really just depends on the conditions and what's going on. And for a lot of, people who were in the stands, it could be confusing. They're like, why did she just shut off right now? And it's like, no, I didn't. Something went wrong and I had to. So that's where it's just so important that everyone is always doing their job 110%, because as long as you're doing that, you will not run into as many errors. But even then, sometimes things break, wear and tear, and we replace things as often as we can, but it'll still happen.
I mean, I see the effort that those crews put into the rebuilds and getting the car right, and even that last minute mapping of the fuel programs and stuff that, they're looking at the track temperature. There's so much science behind it. It's amazing.
Yes.
And they must be devastated when something blows up or breaks or you mess it up, and they must just go, oh my God, all that effort for nothing. Must be tough on them.
Oh, it is. It's a very high or a very low sport. Because, all goes right, you're on top of the world. Something goes wrong, we're all beating each other and ourselves up, and it's something I think why we love it so much is because, there's so much trial and error into it. And that's what you really do have to look at. Like every trip down the drag strip is, you're learning constantly. And so when things go right, you are just absolutely thrilled. But when they don't go wrong, I mean, more so on elimination days where, you're actually working to win the race, it could be devastating. But say if it's like a qualifying run or even a test run, like, hey, at least you learned something then, and then hopefully you can take it with you and not let it happen again.
I have a sense in a sport like Formula One, the drivers are absolutely the focal point from the public's point of view. But I have a sense in drags that it's really much more of a team effort, and that the crew gets as much credit almost.
The crew chiefs, they get the attention they deserve after every run. The reporters, cameras come up to them because they want to hear their opinion on what they say. Sometimes it's funny. I say sometimes, but most of the times, crew and crew chiefs are definitely a lot more serious, and the drivers will pop out and will be the crazy ones. But we're a perfect balance for each other. It's usually a good yin and yang.
I have to say, though, the sponsors must kind of like you, Ashley. It's not bad for them having an amazing driver, and rather. I'm scared to say this sort of thing these days, but clearly an attractive woman who must be brilliant for the sponsors. You're the whole package, I guess, for them.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I mean, it's funny because when I was younger, I never really looked at it like as I was a girl in the motorsport. And it wasn't until I really got involved in the NHRA that I realized, even though drag racing is, the biggest motorsport with the most diversity between women and people of different backgrounds, which is incredible, women are still a minority. We're still not, the major population of drivers. And so realizing that and kind of having some people treat me differently, and some people didn't. I would say it's like a good 50-50. I've learned to take it to my advantage, and I've honestly, the best way I've looked at it is that I have this platform now that I can go to little girls and guys at the track who may be afraid to do something because they think the world looks at it differently, and I can show them that doesn't matter. It's all about believing in yourself and your capabilities, and as long as you do that, you can do anything.
I found a list of the champions in the sport year by year, and I did see a couple of women as the top performing drivers in those years. So is it a bigger sport in motor racing for women than some other areas of?
Yeah, no, drag racing has always, I take that back. Not always. Could go back to the 80s where Shirley Muldowney is pretty much the woman who did the major breakthrough for all of us. But even then in the 80s, no one else was doing that, and she did. And so I'd say from the 90s to now, it is like not uncommon to see women out there, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Do you race against other women? Is that fun?
Yeah, no, it is. It's because my whole life I grew up racing against guys. So when I finally had the opportunity to race against other women, we definitely have a camaraderie between each other. And, you want to support each other. Of course, once you're on the track, let the best, racer win. It's not let the best guy, best girl. It's just let the best racer win. And we support each other through that because we do face some, difficulties the guys might not. So it's good to have someone to go to and talk about it with.
Yeah, that's great. So tell me about the dangers of the sport. It looks horrendous, I have to say, from the sidelines. Is it a dangerous form of motor racing?
I think so. It's hard for me because I absolutely adore and love it, and the danger excites me. But from someone who I know doesn't see things through my eyes, I've had people come up to me handfuls of times, whether it's been extended family or just say someone I ran into from school who was just like, I don't understand why you're doing that. That's so dangerous. And it is. These cars, kind of going back what I said again, they are ticking time bombs. And things can go wrong as far as one thing that actually went wrong with me that I was able to control and get in just in time was I lost a rear tire. It completely was deflated by something loose on the track. It was what we were able to figure out. We really don't have a clear answer of what happened. But this was on a half track run. I was at half track. I was well over 200 miles an hour when that happened. And I was able to control it and stop it. And we have a skid plate at the bottom of the dragster that was able to, not completely let the car get out of control. But usually when that happens, which it's actually happened the last few years to another driver, Steve Torrance. He was much further along than I was, though. He was at the end of the track. That happened to him, and the car was tacoed. as we call it sometimes. It was just in a giant ball, and he was completely fine. He's a rock star driver. But watching it, even for me as a driver, I was terrified. It puts things into perspective, because you do forget about that can happen, and it could get really, really bad. And there are people who have unfortunately lost their lives to it. The late great Eric Medlin, I never got to meet him, but was a big fan of him growing up here in the States. He was testing, I believe, in Sonoma, and the car shook so bad the tires let loose and then were shaking off the ground so bad, unfortunately took his life. So there are a handful of different things that unfortunately can go wrong and do that, but it's just kind of, back to again what I said, that life, is going to happen in the way it happens, and you can't be afraid, and you can't get in the car thinking, is this going to happen to me on this run, or is this going to happen to me on this run? You just have to get in the car, and you have to trust what's behind you. You have to trust your procedure, and that, your instincts will do what's right.
And the cars look almost unsteerable to me. They're so long and skinny, and you've got those funny little wheels at the front. You think, could these things really actually... Can you correct if you start to get a bit sideways? But I watch some of the videos and they can be pretty bent out of shape, and you can still keep them pointed down the track. I mean, is that challenging?
Oh, absolutely. And that's when that happens is usually what we call as a pedal fest. So when the cars get out of control like that, you have to let off the throttle, or else you are going to flip it, or you're going to go into the wall. So at that point, you're playing this pedal game where you're on and off the throttle, but you have to be careful, because on and off the throttle too much, going to go kaboom behind you. So in those moments, you really just have to let it ride out sometimes. And the second that you feel your front wheels are planted back and going straight is when you'll get back on the throttle. And even then, sometimes they'll still skate with you. And that's where, as a driver, you learn where those limits are. When skating too far is too far, and what can whip itself back and what it can't. But yeah, no, it's incredible watching the cars do it. I've seen some replays of myself where I've gotten a little wiggly at the top end, and I'm like, it felt pretty crazy, but it actually looked pretty crazier. So, yeah, no, they're wild rides.
Yeah, amazing. So what do you worry about most in terms of an accident? Is it fire or a crash? Or
for me, I'd definitely say crash. I've had a pretty massive explosion behind me once where, I felt the flames and I saw the flames, and I felt like I was in an oven, which thankfully, it was put out quickly. But in that second, I was like, whoa, that was intense. And so I think for me, like, if I were to say, the biggest fear would be crashing, just because I've seen some gnarly crashes, and some of them that feel like they're just going on forever, and there's that time in between where you don't know if the person's okay or not. And like, that's where actually I do, like, in my head, I'm like, my parents, my boyfriend, like, what would they be going through in that moment? Because me, as a spectator or a friend watching someone crash, it's been devastating for me. I can only imagine what the loved ones are feeling in that moment. So that's definitely the scariest thing that could happen.
Have you crashed yourself?
I have not.
Do you only get one chance and then the crew
Knock
sacks you?
on wood. Yeah, but that is one thing that I've, like, at least for me, it's always been like something I've told myself that it can happen. And like, not necessarily am I scared of it happening, but like, when it does happen, if it does and when happens, like, it's going to be a terrifying experience, but it's what I'm signing myself up for. Those highs of, getting on the track and everything going okay is worth risking it for that.
Ashley, have you lost any friends or known, friends who have sustained injuries through the sport?
I have not lost any friends, but I do know a handful of people who have gotten injured and gotten in bad wrecks. I do know of one young girl actually out in Australia who did lose her life in a junior drag racing accident. I did not know her personally, but I was in contact with her family afterwards when it happened, and just without even knowing them, it was still so devastating, especially it being a young girl. I believe she was like 8 years old at the time. That one hurt really hard for home, just knowing that's the age I started at. And then here in the States, I did witness Brittany Force's major crash at the Pomona Winter Nationals a few years back, and that's one person that I've been able to go to during, getting into the ranks, and she's always been so kind to me and so helpful. So witnessing her massive crash was just terrible. I was, right behind her younger sister, Courtney, who witnessed it, and my heart just dropped for her because it was one of those moments where it took her a little bit to get out of the car. She did pass out during the experience, and she didn't break any bones, but she was completely bruised up. She's a rock star. She's this tiny thing, but she handled it like a champ, and it was pretty crazy though. Yeah, I'm sure, you can look it up on YouTube. It was a gnarly one. I don't even know how many times she flipped.
Have you ever been interested in doing other forms of motorsport, or has it always been about the drags?
No, going back to, I love everything fast. I'm an adrenaline junkie. I actually really enjoy off-roading. That's something that I've always been itching to get into, whether it's, trophy trucks or razors or just, anything four-wheel drive. I love doing dirt stuff like that. As far as circle track stuff goes, I have actually never done anything. I've never done any track courses, formula, anything comparable to that. I've been in some, fun cars before, some experiences, but I'm not on a track course where I would love to get, just go crazy doing that, because that's something totally new to me. I am just, I'm a person that is, like, in general in life, just very fearless. There's a lot that I have on my bucket list. One of them is I really, really do want to go, I want to get my diver's license. So deep sea diving to me, while you're doing cave diving, is just so cool to me. I would love to do something like that one day, but right now my focus has been on drag racing, and it's been an incredible ride.
Well, the beauty of diving actually is that, if you get your diving ticket with your international travelling, which will hopefully be returning soon, it is a great thing to, if you get a day off wherever you are, it is a great thing to be able to do. And I've got a friend actually who worked in the theatre for a long time, and he took up diving, and he became a professional diver in the end. Pretty much gave up the theatre work. But him and the crew used to, when they're travelling around for the show, the crew was the little dive club, and they would all go off for a day's diving. So maybe you can get your crew into it, and then next time you come to Australia, you can come diving.
There we go. I know, and that's one thing too, because you guys, man, Australia is just absolutely gorgeous. So I can only imagine what it looks like underneath the sea.
Actually, here in South Australia, we've got a new racetrack called the Bend, which I think they're proposing doing drag racing there. So maybe you'll be coming down here one day.
I actually heard about that. I know, that's right. Oh, I would love for that to happen.
Well, we'll definitely catch up and go diving if that's the case.
Oh, man, that would be incredible.
Well, Ashley, you've been incredibly generous with your time and with your amazing stories. You are an exceptional person and obviously very talented at what you do. Could you make a two-seater so that you could just give me that experience? You could charge for that.
You know what? They actually have one. They do have one here in the United States. The guy who made it got in a little trouble with it. So maybe, who knows, in the next few years they'll get it going again, because I wish more people could do it and experience it.
It just sounds like the most extraordinary 3.7 seconds that you could ever experience. And most of us are not going to get in a rocket and go to the moon, but that sounds like the next best thing.
Pretty much.
Okay. Well, thank you again for joining me, and it's been an absolute delight, and stay safe and go fast.
Thank you so much. This was awesome. Really appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of Real Risk. If you're a risk taker or know someone who'd be good for the show, please send me an email on admin@speleopix.com.au. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know what you think of the podcast. Subscribe, give me a rating, but most importantly, join me for the next one. We'll see you again on Real Risk.